For thousands of years, another human species lived beside us. And then, they vanished. Not in a puff of smoke, not with a dramatic curtain call. They just quietly disappeared from the stage, leaving us, the last human standing, wondering if we should feel proud or a little nervous. After all, if they could vanish, what does that say about us? Welcome. Get comfortable. Dim the lights. This isn't a bedtime story you'll forget quickly. This is the tale of the forgotten humans, the ones who laughed, hunted, and dreamed like you until they didn't. You wake up in a world that isn't quite your own. The air is colder, sharper, full of smoke and damp soil. The ground crunches underfoot because this is the Ice Age and comfort is not part of the package deal. You're not alone, though. There are others here, stocky, broad-shouldered, heavy-browed people who don't look exactly like you but not exactly unlike you either. Meet the Neanderthals. Yes, those Neanderthals. The name we fling around when someone forgets how to use a fork. They are not the drooling cavemen you were promised in cartoons. These are skilled hunters, fire makers, tool shapers. Their brains? Almost as large as yours. Sometimes larger. Which is awkward, considering how the story ends for them. But let's not skip ahead. Imagine them, short but muscular, like professional wrestlers who decided clothing was optional. Their foreheads slope, their jaws jut, their noses are wide. Useful, by the way, for warming up cold air before it hits the lungs. Evolution gave them the equivalent of built-in central heating. And you? You're still huddling by the fire wishing someone invented fleece pajamas. They move through forests and valleys, hunting mammoths, gathering berries, cracking bones for marrow. Their tools are sharp, their shelters sturdy. They bury their dead with flowers. Just flowers. Which is more sentiment than you give your houseplants. They sing. They laugh. They probably complain about the weather. And if you squint, they look a little too familiar. Here's the unsettling part. You're not just neighbors. You're family. At least, far-off cousins. The kind you don't invite to dinner but occasionally bump into at weddings. Homo sapiens, you, are already wandering the globe. Neanderthals are holding Europe and Western Asia. For a while, you coexist. Maybe you trade tools. Maybe you share food. Maybe you do something else entirely because let's be honest, your DNA today carries fragments of theirs. Which means someone, somewhere, wasn't just sharing campfires. And so begins this strange, overlapping chapter of humanity, when two kinds of human walk side by side, eyeing each other across rivers and mountain passes. For nearly 300,000 years, Neanderthals thrived. That's longer than we've even been around. Let that sink in. They had the run of the place. They were survivors, fighters, builders. And yet, here you are, sitting in the future, while they are reduced to a punchline. Caveman. Brute. A whole species written off because they lost the survival lottery. So, who are they really? Think of them not as strangers, but as the shadows in your own story. They painted caves before you did. They mastered fire, survived brutal winters, and probably told each other jokes. They were not failed humans. They were humans. Just not the version that lasted. And that's the haunting truth. You are not alone in the mirror of history. You are standing on the graves of cousins who once stood taller, stronger, maybe even smarter. But something will unravel later, tip the scales. For now, you've just met them. The forgotten species who walked beside you, leaving footprints in the same mud, gazing at the same stars, dreaming dreams that would never be passed down. Congrats. You're no longer the only human in this story. And it only gets worse from here. You wake up on a bed of animal hides. Comfortable? Not really. But it's warmer than the icy ground, and that counts for something. The cave ceiling drips with condensation, and the faint smell of smoke clings to your hair. Congratulations, you've survived the night. Now comes the hard part, surviving the day. Life as a Neanderthal isn't glamorous. No coffee. No Wi-Fi. No guarantee you'll make it to dinner. But let's walk through it anyway, because this is your normal. First, the cold. It bites. Even with your thick animal furs, the air seeps into your bones. Your breath fogs the cave, mingling with the smoky haze of last night's fire. Someone pokes the embers, feeding it twigs and dry grass, coaxing flames to life. Fire isn't just heat, it's survival. It keeps predators at bay. It cooks your meat. It's the closest thing you have to civilization. You're not alone here. Around you are your kin. A small group, maybe 20. That's about the upper limit for Neanderthal bands. Large enough to hunt, small enough not to starve. You know them all. Too well. Privacy doesn't exist unless you count squatting behind a bush. Children play near the entrance, their laughter echoing off stone. They're already learning the skills they'll need: how to knap flint, how to track deer, how to not freeze to death. Childhood is short. By their early teens, they're working like adults. Spoiler alert, it's not good for your back. Now it's time to hunt. Forget supermarkets. Forget delivery apps. Your food runs on 4 legs and doesn't want to be eaten. The men and women, yes, both, pick up spears, heavy wooden shafts tipped with sharpened stone. No bows yet, no traps sophisticated enough to spare you the chase. Just you, your legs, and your stubbornness. You stalk through the frosted forest, breath held, eyes sharp. A herd of red deer moves in the distance, ears twitching. One mistake and they scatter. One mistake and you're eating roots tonight. The kill is brutal. Spears pierce flesh. Animals scream. Blood stains the snow. You drag the carcass home, muscles straining, stomach growling. There's no ceremony, no sentiment. Just survival. Meat for the fire. Bones for tools. Sinew for string. Skin for clothing. Nothing wasted. Nothing romantic. Back at camp, others prepare food. Strips of meat roast over the fire, dripping fat that hisses on the coals. The smell is rich, almost intoxicating. You chew, savoring the smoky taste, grateful you're not gnawing bark again. Protein is power. It fuels your muscles, keeps your body stocky and strong. You need every calorie just to exist in this frozen world. And when night falls, there's more than just food. There are stories. Voices rise and fall in the flickering firelight. Gestures. Laughter. Maybe even music. Archaeologists found evidence of bone flutes. Imagine that, a Neanderthal playing a tune in the dark, the sound echoing through the cave. Almost human. Too human. Daily life isn't just about hunting. There's tool-making. You sit by the fire, knapping flint, striking stone against stone. Sparks fly. Tiny shards slice your fingers. You curse under your breath. But the payoff is sharp blades, scrapers, points. Tools for survival. Tools that carry knowledge passed down from one generation to the next. There's also care. When someone is injured, the group doesn't abandon them. Bones have been found that healed long after fractures, proof that Neanderthals tended their sick and elderly. Compassion in the Ice Age. Think about that the next time you ghost a text. And yes, there's death. Graves dug with effort, bodies placed with care. Sometimes flowers sprinkled in. A gesture that whispers of belief, of mourning, of love. Even here, even now, humans, whatever shape they take, cling to ritual. So, what's it like to live as a Neanderthal? It's hard, brutal, cold, but it's also full of warmth. A family. Of shared fires and shared burdens. You're not mindless beasts. You're people. Different faces, different bones, same ache in your stomach, same longing for safety. For hundreds of thousands of years, this is life. Repeat. And you do it well enough to survive an ice age. The tragedy? All this, every story, every hunt, every firelight song, vanishes. But we're not there yet. For now you live. For now, the world still belongs to you. You thought Neanderthals were the only forgotten humans? Let's widen the lens a bit. Because while they were chiseling stone and humming around fire pits, other species were doing their own thing. And no, they weren't waiting politely for you to notice them. First, meet Homo erectus. The name sounds stiff, like an awkward Latin insult. But don't be fooled. They were the true globetrotters of prehistory. Africa, Asia, Europe, they went where they pleased, trekking landscapes that would make your Fitbit sob. They carried fire with them. They made tools. They survived longer than most of the species you've ever heard of. Some estimates suggest they lasted nearly 2 million years. And yet, here we are, barely whispering their names. Imagine them, taller than Neanderthals, long-limbed, lean, built to walk. They didn't lounge around caves, they wandered. Every day a journey, every night a fight against predators and cold. Sleep was temporary, fire was sacred, and the horizon was both friend and enemy. And yes, they were clever, adaptable, and persistent, basically everything humans like to brag about today. But eventually, like so many, they vanish from the record. No dramatic extinction event. No flashy meteor. Just a slow fade into obscurity. Then there's the Denisovans. The mysterious cousins. You've probably never seen their skeletons, because there are almost none. A finger bone here, a tooth there. That's it. Yet DNA tells the tale. These shadowy humans interbred with both Neanderthals and modern humans. You carry fragments of them, whether you like it or not. So yes, when you blink, you are partly a ghost of the Denisovans. Creepy, right? Their lives? Unknown. We know almost nothing. Mountains of Siberia, icy caves, and the faint trace of tools and jewelry. That's all. And yet, somehow, they contributed to your immune system, your high-altitude adaptation, even the color of your hair and skin in some populations. They were shaping you while remaining invisible. Silent architects of your body. Isn't evolution polite? Let's pause here. Step back and breathe. Because here's the existential kicker. At one point, the Earth was crowded with human species. Homo sapiens, Neanderthals, Denisovans, Homo erectus, and possibly others you've never heard of. Multiple humans, all carving their way through ice ages, volcanic eruptions, massive migrations, and the occasional saber-tooth attack. Yet today, only you remain. Somehow, against all odds, you're the last one standing. Imagine being the sole heir to a dinner party where everyone else disappeared mid-bite. That's you. That's your family tree. And the irony? All these species, so successful in their own right, left behind lessons we can barely grasp. They were sophisticated, resilient, social, and yes, sometimes terrifyingly competent. Their brains? Their tools? Ingenious. Their culture? And yet, in the story of humans, they are footnotes. Shadows in a cave painting that you can't quite make out. So, who are these forgotten humans, really? Not monsters. Not idiots. Not just a science experiment gone wrong. They were people. People who laughed, fought, hunted, and loved. People who feared storms, celebrated fire, mourned their dead, and passed knowledge from hand to hand. People who shared the same fragile gift you're holding now, life. And the more you think about it, the stranger it gets. Because even as you sit comfortably, reading or watching or thinking, your body carries whispers of them. Neanderthals. Denisovans. Homo erectus. A mosaic of the vanished, stitched together into a species that somehow survived. That's your inheritance. Your burden. Your silent family reunion, one you never asked to attend. Congrats. You've met them all. They aren't just fossils or DNA fragments. They are memories. Shadows. Ghosts you carry in your very bones. And like every ghost story, it only gets darker from here. You're no longer just meeting them. You're walking among them. Among the Neanderthals, Homo erectus, and Denisovans, life pulses slowly but insistently. And what a life it is, full of small victories that matter enormously when the alternative is death. Morning breaks. Not with a sunrise alarm or gentle birdsong. The wind howls outside your stone and timber hut, or, in their case, cave. Snow drifts against the entrance. You squint through the haze of smoke and frost, wondering why you even bothered opening your eyes. But hunger waits. Hunger is not polite. Hunger is an uninvited companion that nags relentlessly. Fire is your first act of mastery. You poke at glowing embers, coaxing flames into life. Sparks fly. Smoke curls. Heat radiates, warming frozen fingers and stiff joints. Without fire, you would be nothing more than frozen marrow and teeth. With fire, you are survival incarnate. Tools are your second act. Flint napped carefully into points, scrapers, and blades. Bones sharpened into needles. Wood carved into spears. Every tool is a triumph of patience and frustration. Tiny victories against a world that would just as soon kill you. And yes, occasionally you cut yourself, swear under your breath, and rethink life choices. But the tools always win. They endure. Hunting is next. Forget modern notions of leisurely strolls to the grocery store. You stalk mammoths, bison, and deer. You track their movements, silent and careful, until you are within striking distance. The chase is brutal. Every step matters. One mistake and the herd scatters. One mistake and you dine on roots and frostbitten tubers. Your body aches. Your lungs burn. But when the spear finds its mark, when the creature collapses, the reward is immediate: food, warmth, and the satisfaction of survival. Back at camp, life continues. The wounded are tended. Children watch intently, learning each skill like a living instruction manual. The elderly are cared for, proof that compassion existed long before Instagram posts about family values. And when night falls, there's storytelling. Hunched over the fire, shadows flickering across stone walls, tales of hunts, storms, and gods, or maybe just the wind, pass from mouth to ear. Each story is a thread in a tapestry that binds them together, a tapestry that now survives only in your imagination. And there's art. Cave walls adorned with handprints, depictions of animals, perhaps even abstract symbols. Sometimes colors, red, ochre, black, smeared by fingers and brushes made of hair and plant fibers. But because they could. Because they wanted to leave a mark. To say, I was here. I mattered. Some people today still can't resist selfies. Turns out, humans always wanted to be remembered. There's ritual too. Burials with care. Objects placed alongside the deceased. Evidence of belief, respect, maybe even fear of what comes after. They understood mortality. They faced it daily. And still, they chose to nurture, to create, to play, and sometimes to laugh. All while the Ice Age raged outside like a drunken god. Food, fire, art, love, ritual, tiny things easily overlooked, but monumental in the lives of these humans. And they managed all of it while enduring cold, predators, famine, disease. It's exhausting just to think about. You, comfortably reading this, are standing on the shoulders of over-engineered survival machines. And yes, it's slightly humbling. Every day was a lesson in adaptation. Every meal earned. Every tool shaped with patience. Every child taught the same truths the elders learned decades ago. The world is beautiful and dangerous, and you survive only if you respect it. And yet, for all this mastery, the world remained indifferent. Eventually, all these species, Neanderthals, Denisovans, Homo erectus, would vanish. But not today. Today you watch them live. Feel the warmth of fire on your face. Smell the smoke, the blood, the earth. Hear the echo of footsteps on stone floors. See the handprints on cave walls, the sharpened spear points, the little flutes carved from bone. They were thriving, persistent, human, and yes, ephemeral. For now, they are alive. For now, they matter. And tomorrow, well, tomorrow is still to come. You step closer to their world. Not just the firelight and tools, but the rhythm of life that hums quietly beneath it all. Life isn't just about surviving the cold or hunting mammoths. It's about living together, because alone, you're food. Together, you are resilience. Neanderthals, Denisovans, Homo erectus, they all relied on each other. Not the casual, I'll text you when I'm home, kind of reliance, but the bone-deep, life or death kind. Imagine your entire existence balanced on whether the person next to you knows how to track deer or start a fire without burning down the cave. That's dependency. That's society in its rawest form. Families are small but tightly knit. Children are taught the essentials from birth: how to gather, how to hunt, how to avoid predators. Play isn't just play, it's training. A child throwing a small stick at a target is already learning trajectory, strength, patience. Every game is a lesson. Every scrape and bruise, a teacher. Adults share labor. Some hunt. Some gather. Some maintain shelters. Some craft tools. Every member of the band has a role. You can't slack off. There is no sick leave. There's no, I'm on vacation. There's only the day and the relentless, icy truth that if you fail, someone goes hungry. And yes, sometimes the failure is fatal. It keeps life efficient. Cooperation isn't optional, it's mandatory. You might think modern humans invented teamwork with office memos and Zoom calls, but these people had it down long before cubicles. When a mammoth falls, everyone plays a part. Some drag, some cut, some carry, some guard. Nobody sits back and watches Netflix while someone else sweats and bleeds. Life is unfair, but efficiency keeps you alive. And hierarchy? Not in the sense of kings and queens, but more like consensus and respect. Stronger, smarter, or older members guide the group, but no one has the luxury of lording over others. A weak leader is a dead leader, and the band knows it. Democracy, Ice Age style, survival of the competent. Subtle, effective, and merciless. Communication is key. Gestures, grunts, and speech weave together. They share information about predators, water sources, weather. Simple things become vital intelligence. And here's the fun, ironic part. Their language, while primitive to us, was sophisticated enough to save lives. Enough to pass down knowledge across generations. Enough to leave tiny imprints in the DNA of humans today. Your ability to say, I'm cold, or don't eat that mushroom owes a nod to them. And yes, emotions exist. Fear, love, anger, humor. They grieve. They celebrate. Archaeologists found evidence of healed injuries, proof that others cared enough to help. They must have laughed too, though we'll never hear it. Probably dry, sarcastic laughter, the kind that says, well, we survived another blizzard without being eaten. Good job, team. Social bonds extend beyond immediate survival. Burials, grave goods, flowers, and ornaments indicate a sense of self, of memory, of ritual. They weren't just surviving, they were reflecting, wondering, maybe even imagining an afterlife, or at least hoping someone would remember them. That's remarkable. Think about it. In a world of constant danger, they paused. They noticed beauty. They honored life. And then there's play. Tool-making could double as art. Hunting practice could double as sport. Flute-like instruments hint at music. Handprints on cave walls hint at pride, maybe even vanity. The species you've written off as primitive were capable of subtlety, creativity, and culture, everything we like to claim as uniquely human today. So, families, clans, communities, they were more than survival units. They were living ecosystems of cooperation, knowledge, and care. Their success wasn't measured in wealth or conquest, but in endurance, ingenuity, and the quiet dignity of making life work under impossible circumstances. And yet, all this brilliance, all this ingenuity leaves almost no trace. Which is why you sit here, thinking about them, and they are gone. The caves are silent. The fire's cold. The flute's unplayed. The handprints faded. But in your mind, you can still hear them. The crackle of the fire. The thud of mammoth hooves. The murmur of voices that once mattered in the world. For now, you have met their culture, felt their rhythm, and understood their subtle triumphs. Tomorrow we will trace the cracks, the forces that began to unweave their tapestry. Because even brilliance cannot guarantee survival. You thought you knew tools? They thought differently. Stone. Everything was a potential weapon, utensil, or work of art. And they had the patience to shape each one into something functional, sometimes beautiful and always vital. Because without tools, you are prey. With them, you are dangerous. Imagine sitting on the edge of a frozen riverbank, flint in one hand, hammerstone in the other. Sparks fly. Tiny shards rain down like miniature meteorites, cutting your fingers if you're careless. But that's the price of survival, and sometimes the price of vanity. Because tools weren't just practical. They were statements. I can manipulate my world. I can survive where others fall. Fire is another masterpiece of ingenuity. Not just heat, not just cooked food. Fire is social glue. It keeps predators away. It warms hands and hearts alike. It's a center around which stories, laughter, and plans gather. The smell of burning wood mixed with meat, the hiss of fat on coals, the smoky haze curling toward the cave ceiling. It's intoxicating, and it's life itself. Hunting strategies were another marvel. This wasn't random stabbing at mammoths. Oh no. They studied prey. They observed migration patterns, understood behavior, and coordinated attacks. Herds were encircled. Spears thrust at the perfect angle. Some tools allowed them to climb, trap, or outsmart animals bigger, faster, and stronger than themselves. Hunting wasn't just a means to eat. It was a lesson in physics, teamwork, and patience. Every kill was a dance with nature, a negotiation with death, and a triumph that echoed in the muscles and minds of the hunters. You can almost hear the dry commentary among them. "Nice throw, Karen. That mammoth is dead, but your arm looks fine." Adaptation was their superpower. Mountains, forests, tundras, deserts, Ice Age Europe, Siberia, Indonesia. They went everywhere humans could, and some places humans can't even imagine without heavy coats and a snowblower. Each environment demanded a new approach. Shelters built from stone or wood, clothing sewn from hides, tools carved for specific climates and prey. And yet, in every environment, their ingenuity remained consistent. They observed, experimented, failed, adjusted, and persisted. Every successful adaptation left traces: flint points, fire pits, bones, footprints in mud. Archaeologists find them today and marvel. But even today, you can't fully grasp the lived experience. The wind biting through furs, the snow crushing your footsteps, the constant calculation of risk and reward. Let's talk subtlety. Not everything was brute force. Bone needles for sewing, cordage twisted from sinew, jewelry carved from shells or teeth, objects that served no survival purpose. And yet, they made them. Maybe to impress each other. Maybe for ritual. Maybe because someone simply wanted beauty in a cold, indifferent world. Imagine a tiny pendant dangling from a neck, carved by hands that also wielded spears and flint. It is art. It is humanity. It is a whisper that says, "We were here and we noticed." Food, too, was more than meat. They gathered plants, tubers, nuts, berries. Knowledge of what was edible and what would kill you was hard-earned and passed along carefully. Imagine the terror of guessing wrong, of taking a bite and realizing the world doesn't forgive mistakes. Yet they thrived, expanding diets, experimenting, observing, teaching, learning. Efficiency tempered by curiosity. Practicality balanced with experimentation. Every day, a lesson. Every meal, a study in biology and chemistry, learned without a book, without a teacher, without a lab. Just eyes, hands, and stubborn survival instinct. So yes, these humans, Neanderthals, Denisovans, Homo erectus, weren't primitives. They were adaptive, clever, and remarkably human. They made tools, mastered fire, crafted art, hunted with precision, and survived harsh environments that would terrify most modern humans. And yet, their story is mostly silent now. They were brilliant and invisible. Tomorrow, in Section 7, we'll explore the complexities of their social rituals, care for the sick and injured, and the subtle ways they celebrated life, deepening our immersion into their rich, vanished world. You think survival is all hunting and fire? Think again. The real story lies in what they did when death and suffering crept close, which they did daily. Life was brutal, but that didn't stop them from caring, from noticing, from mourning, from pausing long enough to recognize that they were more than instinct-driven animals. In their camps, the sick and injured were not abandoned. A broken leg, a deep cut, or frost-bitten fingers didn't automatically mean death. Someone stayed behind. Someone helped. Perhaps they tied splints with sinew, wrapped wounds in furs, whispered encouragement. Someone waded through the cold, ensuring the injured could live another day. That's empathy. That's courage. And it's exhausting just to imagine, yet they did it without fame, without recognition. And yes, some injuries were permanent. Some died despite the care. But the effort mattered. Because they weren't just surviving individually, They were surviving as a network. Everyone had value. Everyone contributed. Even those who could no longer hunt still offered knowledge, guidance, or companionship. Rituals were subtle but powerful. Burial practices reveal that they cared enough to honor their dead. They dug graves, placed tools and objects alongside the deceased, sprinkled flowers. These gestures weren't random, they were deliberate acts of memory and respect. Even in a harsh, unforgiving world, they paused to acknowledge life and death. Imagine standing at the edge of a grave, tiny hands clutching stones, whispering stories. The cold wind cuts through your furs, but for a moment, warmth arises from connection, not fire. That is humanity, pure and unvarnished. There were celebrations too, in small ways. Not grand feasts or parades, but marking hunts, successful births, or simply surviving another harsh season. Handprints on cave walls, painted animals, ornaments, tiny acts that said, "We exist, we notice, we are here together." Think of it as their version of Instagram, except no one was stalking you and no likes were needed. Just pride, memory, and recognition of the fragile joy of life. Music, too, may have existed. Bone flutes and simple instruments hint at melodies filling caves. A tune carried through stone corridors, connecting people to each other and to something larger than themselves. Perhaps a rhythm for hunting. Perhaps a rhythm to soothe a grieving soul. Perhaps just a rhythm because someone wanted it. Children played, yes, but play was never frivolous. Tossing sticks, chasing one another, imitating adults, they learned the skills they'd need to survive. They memorized landscapes, animal behaviors, the nuances of fire and tool-making. Every laugh was a lesson. Every bruise, a teacher. Even joking existed. Imagine their humor. Dry, practical, sarcastic. Nice spear throw. Too bad the mammoth disagrees. Humor kept spirits alive in a world that offered little else. And humor is, after all, a kind of resistance. Social bonds were complex. Families weren't just nuclear. They were clans, communities, networks of interdependence. Cooperation wasn't optional, it was a matter of life and death. Shared meals, shared hunts, shared protection. A strong group meant survival. A fractured group meant extinction. They understood this instinctively, yet it never robbed them of tenderness, care, or subtle joy. Their lives were raw, yes, but also rich. Fire, tools, art, music, ritual, care, humor, these weren't luxuries. They were essentials. Survival wasn't just physical. It was social, emotional, and cultural. And they excelled at all of it. So pause and let that sink in. These forgotten humans, Neanderthals, Denisovans, Homo erectus, were not mere shadows. They were full, complete lives, intertwined with danger, triumph, compassion, and reflection. They laughed, loved, mourned, created, and endured. And yet, the world would not remember them. Their fires would die. Their flutes would fall silent. Their handprints would fade. But for now they live. In the stories you imagine. In the DNA coursing through you. In the knowledge that survival is not just brute strength, but care, ingenuity, and connection. You think the world was empty before you? Far from it. For tens of thousands of years, multiple human species shared the planet. Not as abstract fossils or background scenery, but as neighbors, competitors, occasional collaborators. And you, Homo sapiens, are about to arrive on their doorstep, bringing curiosity, conflict, and subtle chaos. Imagine it, a Neanderthal camp, smoke curling from the cave entrance, children playing, adults repairing tools. They're unaware of you yet, though your species has been wandering across Africa. Eventually, you make it into Europe. A new species, leaner, faster, perhaps more social, showing up with unfamiliar behaviors, strange calls, and awkward curiosity. You watch each other. Study. Hesitate. Avoid maybe. Sometimes clash. And yes, occasionally you interbreed. DNA doesn't lie. Small fragments of Neanderthals, Denisovans, and maybe other species linger in you today. So when you look in the mirror, remember, you are part ghost, part shadow, part vanished neighbor. It's uncomfortable but honest. Resources are finite. Hunting grounds, caves, fresh water, these things matter. Your arrival disrupts patterns. Groups compete, subtly or overtly. Conflicts flare over territory or prey. It's a delicate balance. Cooperation sometimes emerges, but often tension dominates. Survival is zero-sum. One group thrives only if the other yields, retreats, or adapts. And yet, despite tension, knowledge spreads. Techniques, tools, strategies, cultural exchanges happen. Maybe your ancestors learned a better way to sharpen flint. Maybe they adopted new hunting strategies. Knowledge flows sideways, between species, even as competition simmers beneath. It's messy, it's complex, and it's entirely human. Daily life during coexistence is a tightrope. Neanderthals and Homo sapiens both hunt, gather, and create, but their approaches differ subtly. Neanderthals may favor brute strength, patience, familiarity with terrain. Homo sapiens bring flexibility, curiosity, and perhaps innovation, experimenting with traps, projectile weapons, and long-range hunting. Each adaptation gives a slight advantage, cumulative over generations. Small changes that later echo in extinction. And then there are the social dynamics. Humans tend to organize into clans or bands, but the newcomers observe different patterns. Alliances, gestures, perhaps even trade. Maybe a tool for a meal. Maybe a shared fire for warmth. Relationships fluctuate daily, seasonally, across generations. Imagine the tension. Smiles, wary glances, silent judgments over a carcass or a pile of firewood. Every day is negotiation, diplomacy, and survival rolled into one icy package. Cultural differences matter too. Rituals, burials, art, songs, all vary between species. To Homo sapiens, some behaviors of Neanderthals or Denisovans might seem quaint or strange, and vice versa. But there's an unspoken recognition. These are not monsters. These are humans. And humans, no matter the species, respond to fear, hope, hunger, curiosity, and companionship. And humor. Yes, humor survives even here. You can imagine the dry, sardonic quips whispered across species lines. Nice spear. Shame it didn't hit anything. Or a Denisovan eyeing a Homo sapiens invention. Cute, but we've been doing that for centuries. A subtle reminder, even in tense coexistence, humanity persists. For thousands of years, these species overlap. Lives intertwine, DNA mixes, knowledge travels. Yet, this coexistence is fragile. The world is indifferent. Small advantages accumulate. Climate changes, migrations, and population pressures slowly tip the balance. The newcomers, Homo sapiens, survive. The others begin a long, slow fade. But you're not there yet. Right now, the fires burn. Spears are sharp. Hands carve tools and ornaments. Flutes play notes through caves. Children learn, elders teach. The world is still alive with multiple humans. It's precarious, yes, but vibrant. So pause here. Imagine the tension, the cooperation, the silent rivalry, the unspoken respect. You are witnessing history at its most intimate, its most human. And if you listen closely, the echoes of coexistence whisper through your own bones today. Tomorrow, in Section 9, we'll explore how climate, migration, and subtle competition begin to unravel this delicate balance, nudging these species toward eventual disappearance. You're standing in the middle of a landscape that feels permanent, but nothing lasts. Glaciers grind mountains into dust. Rivers carve valleys that didn't exist yesterday. Storms howl across plains and forests alike. And humans, Neanderthals, Denisovans, Homo erectus, once masters of their domains, are at the mercy of forces they cannot control. Climate is the quiet predator. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, temperatures shift. Ice expands. Food sources migrate. Forests retreat. The land changes its mind about what is edible, livable, survivable. Every adaptation once sufficient begins to falter. You sharpen your spear, you braid your sinew, you light your fire, but the world itself starts working against you. Neanderthals, accustomed to cold, burly, and muscular, are not helpless. But sudden warming periods, alternating with freezing cold snaps, force changes in diet, in migration patterns, in shelter. Hunting grounds shrink. Game becomes unpredictable. What once fed dozens now barely feeds a handful. And humans, Homo sapiens, are arriving just as these stresses begin to accumulate. The timing could not be worse. Migration becomes a necessity, not a choice. Bands move in search of prey, water, and shelter. Groups overlap. Resources are contested. Small skirmishes flare over caves or waterholes. Territory is fragile. Cooperation remains possible, but stress is accumulating, like cracks in stone that you hope won't turn into avalanches. And the cracks are everywhere. Competition is subtle but relentless. Homo sapiens brings adaptability, flexible hunting strategies, long-distance weapons, inventive traps, social networks that stretch farther than Neanderthals or Denisovans could manage. Small advantages accumulate over generations. And you, sitting in your warm chair, can appreciate the cruel irony. Survival isn't about strength alone. It's timing, innovation, and luck. Diseases, too, quietly arrive with newcomers. Microbes are opportunists. A group that survived glaciers may falter against invisible pathogens carried by another species. Immunity is partial, fragile, sometimes non-existent. And so, even without direct conflict, the world begins to narrow. Life is a game where even the skilled, the clever, and the adaptable can lose. Social pressures rise. Smaller bands can no longer absorb losses without collapse. Injuries, illnesses, accidents, and scarcity combine. Birth rates falter. Elderly populations, once cared for, now risk being left behind. The intricate web of care, ritual, and cooperation becomes strained. You can imagine the whispered warnings around fires. Hunt went poorly. Food will not last the night. Fear is subtle, pervasive, unavoidable. And yet, they persist. They adapt as best they can. Neanderthals develop more sophisticated tools. Denisovans inhabit harsher altitudes. Homo erectus demonstrates resilience that has lasted over 1 million years. Innovation continues. Fire is maintained. Spears are sharpened. Art persists. Rituals endure. Music and storytelling linger in caves. But the cracks widen. The world is no longer a neutral partner, it's an adversary. And Homo sapiens, ever expanding, begins tipping scales that were balanced for hundreds of millennia. Their arrival doesn't guarantee extinction, but it adds pressure, a constant reminder that survival is a race with no finish line. So pause and imagine. Multiple human species, brilliant, resourceful, resilient, facing a world increasingly hostile to existence. Climate, migration, competition, disease, all working slowly, invisibly, like the relentless drip of water that eventually hollows stone. They fight, they adapt, they endure. But history has a way of quietly erasing even the most tenacious. You thought survival was hard when life just handed you cold mornings and a bad cup of coffee? Imagine living when the entire world seems intent on making your life impossible. Ice sheets creep across continents. Rivers freeze, then flood. Droughts parch the land. The earth isn't neutral, it's actively conspiring. Neanderthals, Denisovans, Homo erectus, each species had thrived for tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of years. They adapted to extremes: brutal winters, scorching summers, shifting forests, treacherous mountains. Their ingenuity was astounding. Tools, fire, clothing, social bonds, these were not luxuries, but survival mechanisms honed over countless generations. But the planet has no patience. Ice ages tighten their grip. A cold snap lasts decades. Prey migrates unpredictably. Mammoth herds shrink. Berries fail to ripen. Waterholes dry up or disappear under snow. Every hunting ground is a gamble. Every meal earned is temporary. And the humans, the masters of survival, begin to feel the first cracks. Droughts, too, chip away at stability. Plant foods vanish. Rivers dry. Resources become patchy, forcing groups into unfamiliar terrain. Migration is no longer leisurely or optional, it's a gamble. A wrong turn could mean starvation. Survival becomes a matter of timing, knowledge, and luck, a combination that even the cleverest species cannot always master. Environmental stress interacts with competition. Homo sapiens, expanding across Europe and Asia, often arrives just as prey becomes scarce. Their tools, strategies, and social networks give them small advantages that compound over generations. Neanderthals may have been stronger, Denisovans more mysterious, but adaptability counts. Slow, relentless environmental pressure paired with competition tips scales toward extinction. Population pressures mount. Small bands, once stable, now face shortages that amplify mortality. Birth rates decline. Losses of key hunters or gatherers leave gaps in knowledge and labor. Elderly or injured members, once reliably supported, become burdens the fragile system cannot sustain. Even cooperation, once a strength, now faces limits imposed by scarcity. Disease is an invisible predator. Pathogens follow migrations. A newcomer species brings microbes to which local populations have no immunity. Infection spreads silently, weakening groups that may already be strained by climate and competition. Deaths mount in slow, almost invisible waves, eroding populations before anyone notices. All these pressures, climate shifts, droughts, competition, disease, intertwine like creeping vines. Each individually may be survivable, but together, they form a lethal web. Adaptation slows. Knowledge transfer struggles. Groups fragment. And then, quietly, imperceptibly, extinction begins its slow march. And yet, for a moment, they persist. They innovate. Sharpen tools. Carve ornaments. Maintain fires. Teach children. Bury their dead with care. Music plays. Stories are told. Even in the shadow of looming disappearance, life continues, resilient and stubborn. It's both inspiring and tragic. They are survival machines, and yet the world, indifferent, relentless, nudges them toward the edge. Every day they persist is a defiance of fate. Every song, every burial, every handprint is a statement. We exist. We matter. So pause here. Picture them, huddled around fires, sharpening flint, teaching children, laughing softly, mourning quietly, all while the earth steadily conspires against them. Ice advances. Rivers shift. Forests vanish. They adapt, they endure, and they persist, but the end looms. Tomorrow, in Section 11, we'll examine how interactions with Homo sapiens, competition, interbreeding, and conflict accelerate the disappearance of these species, blending biology and history in a narrative you can almost feel. So, you've survived the ice, the droughts, and the merciless whims of nature. Congratulations! But now there's a new complication: Homo sapiens. The newcomers. The lean, curious, seemingly harmless species who have a tendency to overpopulate, innovate, and survive just a little too well. At first, coexistence is possible. Small encounters along rivers and hunting grounds, cautious observations, maybe even sharing of tools or fire. DNA suggests interbreeding occurred. A few children, a few genes, and suddenly your species is no longer pure. Spoiler alert, humans are complicated. Sometimes, survival isn't just about spears, it's about whom you sleep next to. But competition is inevitable. Food is finite. Caves and shelters are coveted. Hunting grounds are claimed. Homo sapiens brings strategies, networks, and weapons that are just different enough to give them an edge. Neanderthals may be stronger, Denisovans may have the altitude advantage, but adaptability counts. Even small differences accumulate over generations. Imagine standing in a snowy valley, a mammoth herd just within reach, and spotting another group, lean, alert, armed differently, moving efficiently. You hesitate. You plan. You fight, or you retreat. Every choice affects survival, and every misstep has consequences that echo decades later. Conflict is subtle sometimes. Scarce resources lead to tension. Disputes flare. Maybe it's a tool left behind. Maybe a kill contested. Violence isn't constant, but when it occurs, it's decisive. A few fatalities can destabilize a band. Population numbers are low, every loss matters. Survival is precarious, and Homo sapiens are steadily tipping the balance. And yet, there are signs of cooperation. Shared techniques, interbreeding, and cultural exchange leave traces. Music, art, and tool innovations may cross species lines. They teach each other, sometimes unwittingly, sometimes deliberately. But cooperation can't overcome the relentless pressures of environment, competition, and disease. Interbreeding is a quiet, biological twist of fate. Small fragments of Neanderthal and Denisovan DNA survive in modern humans. Not much, but enough to whisper that extinction wasn't absolute. Survival is messy. Sometimes your legacy isn't your life, it's your genes, lingering invisibly, silently, in distant descendants. The irony is deliciously cruel. You vanish, yet a shadow of you persists forever in the species that outlasted you. Population decline accelerates. Birth rates falter under environmental stress. Disease spreads. Resources dwindle. Bands fragment. Knowledge transfer falters. Injured or elderly members can no longer be cared for adequately. Survival skills, rituals, and traditions start fading. The intricate tapestry of daily life begins to unravel, stitch by stitch. All the strengths that allowed them to survive ice ages, strength, ingenuity, social bonds, become insufficient when climate, disease, and competition converge. They are still clever, still adaptive, but the odds are stacked. Homo sapiens' arrival doesn't deliver the final blow immediately, it merely nudges a species already pushed to the brink. So imagine it, Neanderthals sharpening tools, tending fires, teaching children, while the cold world tightens and Homo sapiens edge closer, uninvited, inexorable. The tension is palpable even without violence. One small misstep, one unlucky hunt, one disease outbreak, and decades of adaptation crumble like dry leaves underfoot. By the time Homo sapiens are fully dominant, the once thriving species are reduced to scattered remnants. Some interbreed. Some linger in isolated pockets. Most vanish entirely. And yet they leave traces, tools, art, bones, DNA, whispers of lives that mattered. Pause for a moment. Let that sink in. These species, brilliant, resourceful, human, fade not with fireworks but quietly, like shadows at dusk. The fires go out. The flutes fall silent. The handprints fade. And Homo sapiens, curious and persistent, continue to expand, largely unaware of the rich, vanishing tapestry that once surrounded them. Tomorrow, in Section 12, we'll explore how climate and catastrophic events further accelerated the disappearance of these species, blending environmental drama with the intimate human perspective. You've survived ice, drought, predators, and even Homo sapiens. Well done. But the planet has one last card to play. Catastrophe. The slow, grinding, merciless kind that doesn't announce itself with a trumpet or fanfare. Instead, it creeps, it shifts, it pressures, and eventually it breaks. Ice sheets advance and retreat. Glaciers scrape valleys, grind mountains into dust, and alter rivers overnight. Hunted prey disappears or migrates. Mammoths, reindeer, bison, they vanish from familiar hunting grounds. Berry bushes wither. Rivers freeze, then flood. Food scarcity becomes inevitable. Even the most skilled hunter, the most clever strategist, faces the same equation: adapt or die. Neanderthals, Denisovans, and Homo erectus are masters of adaptation. They have survived multiple ice ages. Yet the environment no longer bends to them. It bends against them. Each extreme event shrinks territories, compresses populations, and strains social structures. Small bands can't absorb the shocks as effectively as before. The margin for error narrows with every frost, every drought, every storm. And yes, these pressures often intersect with human neighbors. Homo sapiens, increasingly widespread, encroach on prime hunting areas, occupy caves, and outcompete smaller populations for resources. Sometimes conflict arises. Sometimes diseases, carried silently by newcomers, spread rapidly among vulnerable bands. The odds of survival begin tilting, imperceptibly at first, then unmistakably. Extreme climate events also fragment habitats. Rivers dry or change course. Forests shrink. Ice isolates populations, cutting them off from genetic diversity and knowledge exchange. Small, isolated bands struggle to reproduce effectively. Cultural knowledge, hunting strategies, tool-making techniques, medicinal plant use fades. Every generation that fails to fully pass on this knowledge is a step closer to invisibility. Catastrophes don't need violence to be fatal. One long, bitter winter can kill hundreds. A single failed migration or herd disappearance can starve an entire band. A disease outbreak can silently reduce populations over decades. And these events compound. A weakened group is more vulnerable to subsequent stressors. It's tempting to imagine dramatic battles or mass extinctions, but the reality is quieter, crueler. Extinction isn't a bang, it's a long, relentless series of small pressures. A species disappears not because it failed spectacularly, but because survival became impossible despite brilliance, resilience, and ingenuity. Neanderthals, Denisovans, and Homo erectus had brains capable of strategy, social bonds that ensured care and knowledge transmission, and tools that rivaled modern ingenuity. They survived for tens of thousands of years under harsh conditions. Yet climate and catastrophe, paired with the subtle pressures of competition and disease, proved too much. And still, fragments remain. Tools, ornaments, cave paintings, burial sites. DNA hidden in modern humans. Tiny echoes that whisper, "We were here." Even as populations dwindled, cultural remnants persisted, small defiance against an indifferent world. Imagine the final generations, families huddled in cold caves, teaching children what they can, hunting what remains, mourning what is lost, all while knowing, perhaps unconsciously, that survival is slipping through their fingers. Fire burns low. Spears grow dull. Songs are fewer. Flutes fall silent. Handprints fade into rock. So pause. Picture them now, the last bands, resilient yet imperiled, intelligent yet powerless against forces larger than themselves. The environment, relentless and indifferent, slowly erodes their numbers. Homo sapiens expand nearby. Resources dwindle. Disease spreads. Knowledge gaps widen. And, eventually, after millennia of survival, the story comes to an end. Quiet, unceremonious, haunting. You might think that when a species disappears, it vanishes entirely. Gone. Like a candle snuffed out. But the story is more subtle, more insidious, more genetic, because fragments of these vanished humans, Neanderthals, Denisovans, live on. In me. In nearly every modern human outside sub-Saharan Africa. Imagine opening a mirror and realizing that a shadow of someone who lived tens of thousands of years ago stares back at you. Not as a ghost, not as a spirit, but in the blueprint of your cells. A tiny snippet of DNA inherited from interbreeding long ago. Maybe it influences your immune system. Maybe your skin's reaction to sunlight. Maybe even subtle cognitive traits. A quiet reminder that survival doesn't always mean existence. It sometimes means inheritance. Neanderthal DNA contributes roughly 1 to 2% of the genome for most non-African humans. Denisovan DNA lingers in populations across Asia and Oceania, aiding adaptations to high altitudes and other environmental challenges. You are, in part, a mosaic of vanished species. How's that for humility? Your strength, your endurance, your very existence owes something to beings long gone. And yes, that makes family reunions complicated, biologically speaking. The irony is delicious. The species that outlasted them, Homo sapiens, benefits from their innovations, knowledge, and perhaps even survival instincts. Tools, fire management, hunting strategies, and even social behaviors may have been borrowed, unconsciously absorbed, or adapted. Survival isn't just about the strong, it's about the ones who can integrate the strengths of others. Beyond DNA, there are subtler echoes. Archaeologists find tools influenced by Neanderthal techniques. Cave art and ornamentation hint at shared creativity. Perhaps even music, rituals, and social practices seeped into the cultural memory of Homo sapiens. Ghosts of vanished humans linger in what we do, how we live, and the instincts that shape us. Pause for a moment and imagine it. Every time you feel an unexplained impulse to create, to explore, to cooperate, maybe even to grieve deeply, a small part of you is channeling tens of thousands of years of vanished humans. They whisper through genes, habits, and intuition, proof that extinction isn't always absolute. It's partial, layered, and hauntingly intimate. And yet, there's melancholy in this inheritance. DNA can't replace a life. It can't restore firelit caves or the smell of roasting meat in a frostbitten dawn. It can't bring back songs sung by flutes of bone or the laughter of children learning to track animals. Those lives, vibrant and fully lived, are gone. The traces are real but incomplete. A shadow of richness lost. It's worth remembering that extinction is not just a statistic. It's the quiet erosion of experience, culture, and perspective. A Neanderthal cared for a child who never reached adulthood. A Denisovan painted a symbol in a Siberian cave that will never be seen again. A Homo erectus solved a survival puzzle no human alive today will witness. Their presence shaped the world, and yet, their absence is palpable. So when you think about survival, remember this. The strongest, cleverest, most innovative species aren't guaranteed to last. Homo sapiens may have inherited the planet, but it came with fragments of others stitched into the fabric of our biology and culture. You are, in a way, a memorial. A living archive of species that vanished quietly, methodically, irreversibly. And as you sit there imagining them, fire still flickering in your mind, handprints fading into rock, DNA whispering across millennia, you begin to grasp something profound. Life endures, but it remembers. And extinction, no matter how quiet, leaves echoes you can't ignore. You might think that when a species vanishes, it leaves nothing behind. Wrong. Bones, tools, ornaments, cave paintings, they are whispers in the dark, faint but persistent, evidence that someone once lived, thought, and struggled. These remnants are more than objects, they are messages from a vanished world. Fossils are the most obvious traces. Skeletons, fragmentary or complete, tell stories of height, strength, injury, and even disease. You can see healed fractures, evidence that someone cared for the wounded. You can glimpse teeth worn from years of chewing tough roots and meat. You can measure the curves of skulls, the size of brains, the angles of shoulders and hips. Each fossil is a biography, silent yet intimate. Imagine holding a Neanderthal molar. Tiny, unassuming. Yet it speaks volumes. Diet. Age at death. Perhaps even a moment of pain, a smile, or a scream long forgotten. In these remnants, the everyday life of an entire species crystallizes into something you can touch, almost like reaching back across millennia. Tools, of course, are another record. Flint blades, bone needles, wooden spears, each one is evidence of ingenuity and adaptation. Some tools were practical, others, perhaps, artistic. A chipped flint point tells you about hunting. A decorated pendant tells you about social bonds, pride, and ritual. Together, they form a mosaic of intelligence, creativity, and survival strategy. Cave art adds another layer. Handprints, depictions of animals, abstract symbols, these aren't just decoration. They are memory, communication, identity. They show that even in a world dominated by survival, humans, every human species, pause to notice beauty, to leave a mark. Every brushstroke, every smear of pigment, is an assertion, we were here. We mattered. And the irony? These markers were never meant for you. No Neanderthal or Denisovan imagined a future human cataloging their existence with high-tech microscopes or DNA analysis. Yet here you are, piecing together fragments of lives that ended tens of thousands of years ago, trying to reconstruct a world that no longer exists. Artifacts also reveal social complexity. Jewelry made from shells, carved bone, or teeth hints at status, relationships, or ritual practice. Burial goods tell us that these humans had concepts of memory, mourning, perhaps even an afterlife. A simple stone tool, carefully crafted, is more than utility, it's evidence of foresight, planning, and manual skill. Every excavation site is a storybook written in mud, rock, and bone. Layers of sediment preserve snapshots of daily life. Fire pits with charred remains of meals. Broken tools scattered where they fell. Piles of animal bones with teeth marks and cut marks. You can almost imagine footsteps echoing through the cave, the murmur of voices, the flicker of firelight across stone walls. Archaeology is not merely science, it's resurrection of the vanished. Every shard of pottery, every flint point, every fossilized bone is a doorway into the lives of beings long gone. And the deeper you dig, literally and metaphorically, the more intimate the story becomes. Pain, triumph, laughter, fear, they all whisper from the sediment. So pause. Picture it, a Neanderthal band preparing for winter, a Denisovan child learning to track prey, a Homo erectus sharpening a spear, oblivious to the fact that their species will vanish. The tools, bones, and paintings they leave behind are the only witnesses. And now, you are the witness to their witness. These silent records are fragile, incomplete, and infinitely precious. They allow us to imagine the rhythm of life in vanished worlds, to feel the pulse of human species who once shared the planet with us. You might think that when a species disappears, all its achievements vanish with it. Wrong. The tools, art, and subtle innovations of Neanderthals, Denisovans, and Homo erectus didn't vanish entirely. They linger, like shadows shaping the next act of the human story. Take tools, for instance. Homo sapiens didn't invent everything from scratch. Napped flint blades, bone awls, spears, and scrapers were perfected over tens of thousands of years by species we now consider primitive. Yet these tools were efficient, elegant in their simplicity, and sometimes so effective that modern humans borrowed, adapted, or improved upon them without even realizing it. Imagine a Neanderthal holding a finely shaped spear point, considering balance, weight, and sharpness. Now imagine a Homo sapiens encountering that technology centuries later. The knowledge transfers subtly. A spear is sharper, a hunt more efficient, survival slightly more attainable. Extinction doesn't erase innovation, it quietly passes it along. And art? Handprints, cave paintings, carved ornaments. They didn't vanish either. The aesthetic sensibilities of vanished humans likely influenced Homo sapiens, whether through direct observation or subtle cultural diffusion. A red ochre handprint in a Siberian cave might inspire a generation of artists, teaching humans that making marks, leaving evidence of presence, matters. Creativity is contagious, even across species. Ornaments are another example. Shell necklaces, carved bone pendants, and feathered adornments suggest identity, pride, and ritual. Homo sapiens didn't invent symbolism out of nowhere. They inherited hints of it, learned that decoration can signify status, relationships, and community. A culture of aesthetic intelligence passed from species to species, quietly shaping human behavior long after extinction. Hunting strategies, too, were passed along. Coordinated drives, ambush tactics, and trapping methods may have crossed species boundaries. You can imagine a Neanderthal watching Homo sapiens attempt a complex hunt and thinking, cute, but we've been doing that for centuries. Yet, through imitation or subtle collaboration, these strategies survived, adapted, and eventually became second nature to Homo sapiens. Even social behaviors leave traces. Caring for the sick, teaching children, performing rituals for the dead, these practices likely influenced Homo sapiens. Shared instincts for empathy, cooperation, and communal survival may have been amplified by interspecies interaction. The vanished species taught, in effect, by example. They disappeared physically, but socially and culturally, they left fingerprints that persist today. And let's not forget DNA. You carry pieces of them, fragments that influenced everything from immunity to physiological adaptation. High-altitude tolerance in certain populations? Partly Denisovan. Immune responses to pathogens? Partly Neanderthal. Even traits as subtle as skin tone, hair texture, or metabolic tendencies may carry echoes of extinct species. Survival is messy, but inheritance is a long shadow. All of this reshapes how we understand extinction. It isn't just disappearance, it's transformation. Even in vanishing, these species shaped the world, molded Homo sapiens, and influenced life for millennia. Their legacy is subtle, silent, and pervasive. You walk among them every day without realizing it. So pause. Picture them again. A Neanderthal carefully carving a pendant, a Denisovan painting a bison on a cave wall, a Homo erectus experimenting with fire and flint. These acts, once fleeting, ripple forward through time. They echo in DNA, tools, social behaviors, and cultural patterns. Extinction, in other words, is not the final word. Influence persists quietly, invisibly, haunting the living species that outlasted them. You might think extinction happens suddenly, a comet, a volcano, a dramatic Hollywood scene. Reality is more insidious. Extinction is a slow squeeze, a tightening noose of climate shifts, competition, and relentless environmental pressure. And by now, Neanderthals, Denisovans, and Homo erectus are feeling the pressure like never before. Ice sheets advance and retreat unpredictably. Winters grow longer, summers shorter. Resources fluctuate violently. Mammoth herds vanish from familiar plains. Rivers freeze, flood, or disappear. Small bands are forced to migrate constantly, abandoning shelters, hunting grounds, and safe zones. Every movement is a gamble. Every decision could mean survival or starvation. Imagine walking for days in snow-choked valleys, exhausted, starving, knowing that a rival species, Homo sapiens, is not far behind. They hunt differently, travel farther, communicate more efficiently, and adapt quickly. They are subtle predators of opportunity, and the world is already tipping in their favor. Droughts compound the problem. Plant foods disappear. Water sources become unreliable. Animal populations fluctuate erratically. Small bands are stretched to the breaking point. Social bonds, once strong, fray under the stress of scarcity. Elderly and injured members are harder to protect. Knowledge transfer, critical to survival, weakens. Every generation is more vulnerable than the last. Competition with Homo sapiens accelerates the decline. Their adaptive strategies, complex social networks, and superior communication allow them to exploit resources more efficiently. Conflicts erupt sporadically, disputed hunting grounds, prime cave shelters, and contested water sources. Small skirmishes might not kill hundreds, but for tiny populations already stressed by environment, each loss is catastrophic. And don't forget disease. Pathogens carried by new populations spread rapidly. Immunity is uneven, fragile, often non-existent. A single epidemic can devastate isolated groups already struggling with dwindling food supplies and harsh climates. Survival is no longer just a matter of skill, it's a roll of the dice against invisible enemies. Fragmentation of populations is another silent killer. Bands become isolated by ice, mountains, or rivers. Gene flow slows or stops. Cultural knowledge, hunting techniques, medicinal plants, fire management, fails to transmit fully. Small genetic pools make populations vulnerable to disease and inbreeding. Strength, once abundant, becomes fragile. Even ingenuity has limits. Tools, fire, and social cooperation can only do so much against climate extremes, relentless competition, and dwindling resources. You can innovate endlessly, but if there is no prey, no shelter, no water, survival becomes improbable. And eventually, the cumulative pressure tips the balance toward extinction. Yet they persist. Faintly, stubbornly. A Neanderthal band crosses a frozen river. A Denisovan carves a spear. A Homo erectus tends fire through a bitter night. Courage, intelligence, and resilience linger even as numbers dwindle. Every day survived is a minor miracle. But miracles can't last forever. And here's the cruelest irony. Homo sapiens benefit from these pressures indirectly. By outlasting competitors, adopting or adapting their strategies, and inheriting fragments of their DNA, Homo sapiens emerge stronger, smarter, more resilient. The very brilliance of Neanderthals, Denisovans, and Homo erectus becomes part of the species that replaced them. Survival is messy, inheritance is cruel, and extinction is quiet. Pause and imagine the scene: frozen landscapes, scattered bands of vanished humans, fires burning low, children learning quickly, elders whispering advice, tools clutched in tired hands. Ice, drought, predators, and competition gnaw relentlessly. And slowly, imperceptibly, one by one, they disappear. Picture this: a small band huddled in a cave, the wind howling outside. Snow drifts against the entrance, and the fire flickers, casting long shadows across carved walls. This is one of the last known Neanderthal groups. Or perhaps Denisovans. Maybe a distant, stubborn population of Homo erectus. Numbers are few. Knowledge is precious. Every child, every hunter, every elder carries centuries of accumulated wisdom, and with each passing day, that wisdom becomes more fragile. Population has dwindled. A few dozen individuals, perhaps fewer. Hunting is risky. Food is unpredictable. Each encounter with prey is a gamble. Each misstep could be fatal. The cold is relentless. Shelters are worn. Clothing frayed. And yet, life continues. Not because it's easy or fair, but because stubborn survival instinct refuses to yield. Social bonds have never been more important. Care for the sick, the injured, the elderly, it is essential. Abandonment isn't an option. A lost individual can mean collapse for the band. Every meal is shared. Every fire is tended. Every tool repaired and preserved. They rely on each other more than ever. Cooperation isn't optional, it's a lifeline. Innovation persists too. Spears sharpened, fire maintained, shelters reinforced. Small improvements matter enormously when survival margins are razor thin. Every tiny advantage increases the chance that at least one person survives another day. Every act of ingenuity is amplified by necessity, yet even brilliance can't reverse the larger forces at work. Cultural practices continue, quietly, stubbornly. Burials are maintained when possible. Ornaments are carved. Handprints are painted. Music might still echo in caves. Perhaps these rituals provide comfort, perhaps guidance, perhaps simply a reminder: we are alive, we are human, and we have always been here. But the cracks are obvious. Bands are isolated. Genetic diversity shrinks. Disease spreads rapidly. Food scarcity becomes chronic. Climate remains merciless, fluctuating unpredictably. And somewhere, just beyond sight, Homo sapiens expands steadily, a silent pressure on already fragile populations. The end isn't sudden. It is cumulative. It is inexorable. We can catch glimpses in the archaeological record: isolated tools scattered in distant caves, bones showing signs of care, ornaments carved meticulously despite dwindling numbers. Each fragment is a testament to persistence, a quiet scream that life mattered even as it neared its final chapters. Imagine the last generation: children learning hunting skills, elders sharing stories of countless winters survived, the fire's glow reflecting in tired eyes. They will hunt, create, teach, mourn, and endure. And yet, the world is closing in. Survival is not guaranteed. Even in the face of extinction, they leave traces. DNA carries fragments of their existence. Tools and ornaments carry their ingenuity. Cave art whispers of creativity, care, and reflection. These remnants survive to tell us their story, to remind us that brilliance, resilience, and humanity do not guarantee survival. And so, the last centuries are quiet, persistent, and tragic. They are marked by small victories: a successful hunt, a child learning a crucial skill, a fire kept burning through a storm. They are marked by losses: starvation, illness, injury, bands fragmenting, traditions failing to pass fully. The slow, cumulative pressure of climate, competition, disease, and isolation finally tips the scales. Imagine the final moments of these vanished humans: the fire fading, tools laid down, songs silent, handprints left unfinished. Their lives, vibrant and fully realized for tens of thousands of years, approach an inevitable quiet. The Earth continues its indifferent course, and Homo sapiens remain, inheriting a planet shaped in part by the vanished species' ingenuity, creativity, and resilience. You might think the final moments of Neanderthals, Denisovans, and Homo erectus were silent, lonely, isolated. Sometimes they were. But sometimes they were noticed. Homo sapiens were expanding across Europe, Asia, and beyond. And with expansion comes encounter, curious, tense, subtle, sometimes fatal. Picture it, two bands meet across a frozen valley. One species, taller, leaner, quick with gestures and speech. The other, stockier, built for endurance and strength. They observe. They hesitate. Perhaps they exchange tools. Perhaps they steal a kill. Perhaps they ignore each other entirely. Every encounter is a delicate negotiation with survival itself. DNA confirms that some encounters went further than observation. Interbreeding occurred. Children were born. Genes passed down, fragmentary but persistent. You are, in part, the product of these quiet liaisons. Humanity carries shadows of these vanished species in every step, every breath, every instinct. It's an uncomfortable inheritance, but one that shaped modern humans profoundly. Competition remained subtle but deadly. Hunting grounds were limited. Food scarce. Tools and strategies of one species were sometimes superior to another. Small skirmishes could leave a band decimated. Every loss mattered exponentially more in tiny populations nearing extinction. Survival required vigilance, strategy, and luck in equal measure. Imagine a Neanderthal returning from a failed hunt to find Homo sapiens had claimed the cave. Perhaps they retreat. Perhaps they adapt. Perhaps, rarely, they join forces temporarily. The margins were thin, and life depended on keen judgment, observation, and a healthy dose of stubbornness. Disease, too, likely played a silent role. Pathogens carried by Homo sapiens could have spread rapidly through small, isolated populations. Immunity was partial or non-existent. Deaths, slow and invisible, added to pressures already mounting from climate, scarcity, and social isolation. Extinction is often quiet, it doesn't roar. Yet even in these last encounters, knowledge transfer persisted. Hunting strategies, tool designs, or fire techniques may have spread across species lines. Some Neanderthal innovations, for instance, might have been integrated by Homo sapiens. Culture doesn't vanish immediately, even if the species does. A spear point, a burial ritual, a decorative pendant, all could influence the future long after the creator is gone. Social bonds mattered more than ever. Isolated bands could not afford mistakes. Care for the sick, teaching the young, maintaining tools and fire, all became critical. Every member carried knowledge crucial for survival, yet the capacity to preserve it was shrinking. Every encounter with Homo sapiens was a gamble, potentially beneficial, potentially fatal. Archaeological traces show these last interactions in fragments, tools found in overlapping layers, partial DNA sequences, ornaments similar in style across species lines. Even the smallest artifacts hint at encounters that shaped the course of extinction and survival. These traces whisper stories of cooperation, competition, and quiet influence. Picture the scene: a Neanderthal child watching a Homo sapiens hunt, learning without knowing it, perhaps unconsciously adopting new techniques. A Denisovan carving a pendant while another group crosses a distant river, carrying unfamiliar tools and strategies. And somewhere in the background, the relentless pressure of climate, scarcity, and isolation continues. They persist. They adapt. They endure. But the odds are narrowing. Extinction is patient, relentless, and invisible. And yet, in this quiet final chapter, they leave traces, DNA, cultural influence, subtle lessons, that echo far into the future. So the story is paradoxical. The vanished humans are gone, yet not entirely. They persist in fragments, influencing the species that survived, whispering through genes, tools, and traditions. Their disappearance is both final and incomplete. You might think that extinction is absolute, a final door slammed shut on an entire species. Cute idea. Reality is messier, stranger, and far more fascinating. Neanderthals, Denisovans, and possibly other vanished humans live on in you. Not metaphorically. Literally. In your DNA. About 1 to 2% of the genome in most non-African humans comes from Neanderthals. Denisovans contribute fragments to populations in Asia, Oceania, and beyond. That means when you sneeze, shiver in cold, or squint at sunlight, part of the response is inherited from a species that disappeared tens of thousands of years ago. A Neanderthals or Denisovans adaptation to environment, pathogens, and survival stress subtly echoes in every cell. Take immunity, for example. Certain genes passed down from Neanderthals affect how modern humans respond to viruses and bacteria. Some of these genes confer resistance, others vulnerability. Evolution is messy. Life doesn't hand you perfect solutions. It hands you fragments of survival strategies, and you make do. Every cold you survive, every pathogen you fight, owes something to these vanished species. Altitude adaptation is another gift. Populations in Tibet and other high-altitude regions carry Denisovan DNA that helps them survive thin air. Imagine your great-great-grandparents trying to live atop frozen mountains, their lungs and blood slowly adapting to the rarefied air. That adaptation survives in you, quietly, invisibly, a ghostly legacy. Even subtle traits, skin tone, hair type, metabolism, may carry influences from vanished humans. It's not dramatic, not flashy. No one hands you a medal for surviving Ice Age genes embedded in your DNA. But it's there. A quiet, ongoing testament that extinction is not always final. Some of the vanished persist through you. And it's not just biology. Some researchers argue that certain cognitive tendencies, sensory perceptions, or behavioral patterns may carry faint echoes of these species traits. Cooperation, risk assessment, attention to detail, sensory acuity, whatever advantages helped Neanderthals and Denisovans survive millennia might subtly influence modern humans. Survival leaves traces, even when life itself does not. Pause for a moment and imagine it. Every sneeze, every shiver, every instinct to cooperate or compete, potentially shaped in part by humans who vanished thousands of years ago. A subtle whisper across time, a shadow in your genome. You are a mosaic stitched together from species that once walked frozen plains, climbed mountains, and painted caves. There's something haunting about this inheritance. These species failed to survive the relentless pressures of climate, competition, and disease. Their populations dwindled until the Earth was silent. Yet, in a small but tangible way, they live on. Survival wasn't granted, extinction wasn't absolute, and influence is often invisible. You carry proof of that paradox. Even in the quiet of your own body, you are a monument. Every heartbeat carries a trace. Every adaptation whispers of extinct intelligence, endurance, and resilience. They may have vanished from the surface of the Earth, but they echo in the physiology and instincts of modern humans. Extinction is not the end. It's a transformation, a whisper, a shadow preserved in biology. So next time you notice an unexpected resilience, a stubborn streak, or a moment of uncanny intuition, remember this. Part of you was designed not just by Homo sapiens, but by species that vanished, survived harsh worlds, and left genetic echoes for a future they never saw. Extinction is quiet, but its legacy is persistent, woven invisibly into the living. You might think that when a species disappears, it leaves nothing behind but bones and DNA. Cute but wrong. The vanished humans, Neanderthals, Denisovans, maybe even Homo erectus, left cultural footprints, subtle echoes in technology, social behavior, and creative expression. These traces influenced Homo sapiens, shaping the species that outlasted them. Take tools, for example. Flint blades, scrapers, bone needles, and wooden spears weren't just practical, they were refined over tens of thousands of years. Some of the earliest Homo sapiens innovations borrowed heavily from these designs, often without anyone realizing it. A spear point sharpened by a Neanderthal hand could be the difference between life and death for a Homo sapiens hunter centuries later. Innovation isn't always independent. It's cumulative, often invisible, and sometimes borrowed from vanished neighbors. Or consider art and ornamentation. Neanderthals painted caves, carved bone pendants, and decorated tools. They may have sung, whistled, or played flutes. Homo sapiens, arriving in overlapping territories, likely observed, mimicked, and adapted these practices. Symbolic thought isn't invented in isolation, it evolves through interaction. The vanished humans left templates, hints, and inspiration that influenced creativity, ritual, and social cohesion. Hunting strategies were another subtle legacy. Coordinated drives, ambushes, long-range projectiles, and trapping techniques may have transferred across species lines. Homo sapiens learned, consciously or unconsciously, how to leverage these strategies, expanding hunting efficiency and survival rates. The vanished humans' practical ingenuity quietly shaped the evolution of Homo sapiens' adaptability. Even social behavior carries echoes. Care for the sick, rituals for the dead, and cooperative child-rearing may have been reinforced or inspired by interactions with other human species. Empathy, planning, and group cohesion, traits critical to survival, may have been honed through cross-species observation and imitation. Cultural inheritance doesn't require survival, it only requires influence. Pause and imagine it. A Neanderthal mother teaching her child to track prey while a nearby Homo sapiens band observes. A Denisovan carving an ornament that a visitor admires, then tries to replicate. A shared fire, a brief alliance, a stolen tool, small interactions that ripple through generations. Extinction may erase a species, but influence persists quietly, invisibly, shaping those who survive. Even ritual and storytelling may have carried forward. Burial practices, symbolic decoration, and possibly musical traditions didn't vanish overnight. They left impressions on Homo sapiens' developing culture, influencing ceremonial behaviors, social cohesion, and even early spiritual thought. The vanished humans' ideas survived as faint but persistent echoes. And let's not forget resilience as a cultural trait. The vanished humans survived ice ages, glaciations, droughts, and fierce predators. They adapted, innovated, and persisted for tens or hundreds of thousands of years. Homo sapiens inherited not just tools or symbols, but a blueprint for endurance, for ingenuity, for the stubborn persistence that defines our species today. So pause again. Picture these vanished humans, painting, carving, hunting, teaching, surviving against impossible odds. Their lives end, yes, but their influence continues. Every flint tool, every decorated pendant, every cooperative hunt is a whisper from the past, guiding Homo sapiens toward survival. Extinction is quiet, but culture is persistent. In a way, they never really disappear. Their hands touch the present through Homo sapiens' inventions, rituals, and behaviors. They are shadows, shaping the living from the past. Extinction is not absolute. It is transformation, a cultural inheritance quietly embedded in human history. Extinction is often imagined as silence. But the vanished humans, Neanderthals, Denisovans, Homo erectus, left echoes in the minds of Homo sapiens. Subtle, invisible cognitive influences that shaped how our species thinks, cooperates, and perceives the world. They may be gone, but their presence lingers in thought patterns, instincts, and social behaviors. Consider observation. Early Homo sapiens encountering Neanderthals or Denisovans weren't just meeting another species. They were witnessing a form of intelligence adapted to harsh conditions for tens of thousands of years. Hunting strategies, tool-making techniques, and survival behaviors were absorbed, consciously or unconsciously. Every interaction was a lesson in endurance, efficiency, and problem-solving. Imitation, one of the cornerstones of learning, likely played a role. Homo sapiens may have observed fire management, shelter construction, or tracking techniques and incorporated them into their own practices. Small advantages accumulate over generations. One copied method, one observed behavior, might have increased survival rates just enough to tip the balance in favor of Homo sapiens in critical moments. Social cognition, too, may carry echoes. The vanished humans were deeply social, cooperative, and capable of empathy. They cared for the injured, shared food, and maintained communal rituals. Early Homo sapiens exposed to these behaviors could internalize them, subtly shaping norms around cooperation, teaching, and empathy. Some instincts we consider innate may be layered with lessons gleaned from vanished species. Even problem-solving and innovation may bear traces. Neanderthals experimented with fire, crafted tools, and developed strategies for hunting large, dangerous animals. Homo sapiens likely witnessed these innovations and adapted them to their needs. The vanished humans' cognitive patterns, their approaches to risk, planning, and anticipation, may have seeped into the developing toolkit of human intelligence. Pause for a moment. Imagine a young Homo sapiens watching a Neanderthal band coordinate a hunt. The child sees movement, timing, communication, subtle lessons in cooperation and strategy. Perhaps the child cannot articulate it, cannot name it, but later, instinctively, they organize their own hunts more effectively. The vanished humans influence thought long after their physical disappearance. And memory carries echoes too. Tools, artifacts, and cave markings act as cognitive scaffolds. By interacting with these objects, early Homo sapiens absorbed patterns, strategies, and cultural signals. A carved pendant isn't just decoration, it's a lesson in precision, planning, and social signaling. Every object left behind shapes mental development in subtle ways. Psychologically, even the knowledge of another human species likely affected Homo sapiens' worldview. Awareness of competition, observation of different social structures, and exposure to diverse survival strategies may have encouraged flexibility, adaptability, and strategic thinking. Extinction, in this sense, is not only biological, it's psychological. The haunting irony is that these cognitive echoes persist even as the species themselves vanish. Physical presence disappears, but lessons linger, shaping the mind and behavior of the species that survives. Every cooperative hunt, every shared strategy, every observed innovation is a whisper from the past. So pause again. Picture those vanished humans, teaching children, coordinating hunts, tending fires, observing their environment with intense focus. You can't hear their voices, but their cognitive footprints remain. You can't see them, but they influence thought patterns, problem-solving, and social behavior across millennia. Extinction is never truly complete when influence survives in the minds of the living. Imagine walking across a desolate landscape, snow crunching underfoot, wind cutting through the sparse trees. You stumble upon a cave. Bones scattered. A broken spear. Charred remains of a small fire. These are the silent witnesses to the last days of Neanderthals, Denisovans, or Homo erectus, fragments of a world on the edge of vanishing. Archaeologists piece together these final chapters from subtle clues. Fossilized bones tell us about health, age, and even cause of death. Small bands, isolated by glaciers, mountains, or rivers, show signs of dwindling populations. Where patterns on teeth suggest malnutrition. Fractured bones hint at injury in a world without hospitals. Life had grown perilously thin. Stone tools reveal adaptation and resourcefulness. Spears sharpened, scrapers repaired, flint points reused until they almost disappeared. These weren't just tools, they were survival mechanisms honed over millennia. The final generations relied on every advantage. Every artifact is a testament to ingenuity under pressure, a last attempt to stay alive in a world increasingly hostile to survival. Caves themselves preserve stories. Charcoal layers hint at controlled fires, sometimes used for warmth, sometimes for cooking, sometimes for signaling others. Cave walls may still bear handprints, smudges, and primitive paintings. These subtle markings suggest continuity, ritual, and even a desire to leave traces, proof that they existed even if the world was already erasing them. Environmental clues are just as revealing. Pollen trapped in sediment tells us which plants were available. Animal remains show what was hunted, what went extinct locally, and how diets shifted. Rivers, glaciers, and shifting landscapes explain migration patterns, isolation, and the gradual compression of habitable zones. Climate was a relentless adversary, leaving clear signs of the stress that contributed to extinction. Interactions with Homo sapiens appear in overlapping layers. Tools, ornaments, and even DNA indicate occasional contact, interbreeding, or competition. Some sites suggest avoidance strategies, while others hint at cohabitation, however temporary. These traces help reconstruct the delicate balance between survival, conflict, and adaptation in the final centuries. Pause for a moment. Picture the scene: a tiny band navigating a frozen valley, fire flickering in a cave, a child learning to track, elders teaching knowledge accumulated over generations. Outside, snowdrifts block paths, rivers freeze, prey moves unpredictably. Somewhere nearby, Homo sapiens observe or compete silently. Each day is a precarious balance between life and disappearance. Even the smallest artifact becomes meaningful. A broken flint scraper is more than a tool, it is evidence of struggle and adaptation. A charred hearth is more than warmth, it is defiance against a relentless environment. Every fragment tells a story of ingenuity, perseverance, and quiet resilience in the face of extinction. By carefully studying these clues, researchers identify the final known habitats of these species: isolated caves, mountain valleys, and remote plains where populations lingered for centuries beyond their heyday. Each site is a poignant reminder: life persisted to the very end, even as the world gradually erased it. And yet, the story is never complete. Fossils are fragmentary. Tools are incomplete. DNA is sparse. The vanished species leave behind only hints of their final acts, leaving us to reconstruct entire lifetimes from shards of evidence. Extinction is messy, quiet, and incomplete, a series of whispers rather than a roar. So pause again. Imagine the last footsteps: careful, deliberate, cautious. Every movement matters. Every meal matters. Every interaction, whether with kin or with Homo sapiens, carries consequences. The environment is merciless. The pressures are relentless. And yet, for a fleeting moment in geological time, these humans persist, leaving traces that will outlast them in silence, waiting for us to discover. Extinction is usually presented as a clean story. Species fail, they vanish, the world moves on. Charming, isn't it? Reality is far more nuanced, quieter, and far more instructive. Neanderthals, Denisovans, and Homo erectus didn't vanish in a single cataclysm. They disappeared because of compounding pressures: climate shifts, scarce resources, disease, isolation, and competition with Homo sapiens. Their story teaches us something unsettling: survival is never guaranteed, no matter how intelligent, strong, or resilient you are. Think about that. These species survived ice ages, migrated across continents, innovated tools, tended fires, and cared for one another. Yet, the cumulative effect of slow, relentless challenges tipped the balance. Life isn't fair. It is indifferent. And the end often arrives quietly, without drama or spectacle. There is also the lesson of adaptation and its limits. Neanderthals were strong, highly skilled, and intelligent. Denisovans adapted to extreme altitudes. Homo erectus survived for over 1 million years. Yet even brilliance and flexibility have boundaries. Environmental change can outpace adaptation. The best strategies, the sharpest tools, the strongest bonds, they may still be insufficient in the face of relentless pressure. Survival is fragile. Competition matters. Homo sapiens weren't inherently superior in every respect, but their flexibility, social networks, and ability to innovate under pressure gave them an edge. Sometimes, extinction isn't caused by a single predator or event. Sometimes, it's a subtle, invisible series of advantages favoring one species over another. Small differences, compounded over generations, become decisive. And yet, extinction leaves echoes. DNA persists in descendants. Tools, ornaments, and cultural behaviors influence other species. Even vanishing humans shape the world long after their populations dwindle. This teaches a second lesson: disappearance doesn't erase influence. Survival of the species is not the only measure of legacy. Persistence, adaptation, and creativity leave imprints that echo far into the future. Fragility is another lesson. Small populations are vulnerable. Isolation increases risk. Disease, famine, and climate extremes hit disproportionately. Survival isn't just about strength, it's about numbers, diversity, and resilience in systems. When populations shrink too far, extinction becomes almost inevitable. There's also a psychological lesson, albeit subtle. Extinction is not a failure of intelligence or effort, it's a matter of circumstance, timing, and chance. These vanished humans were brilliant, resourceful, and enduring. And yet, the slow convergence of factors beyond their control was enough. The lesson for us: no matter how advanced a species becomes, vulnerability remains. Finally, consider the legacy of influence. Extinct humans shaped Homo sapiens, genetically, culturally, cognitively. Their innovations, social behaviors, and adaptations became part of the surviving species. Extinction can be both an end and a transformation. Even in disappearance, there is contribution, echo, and enduring presence. Pause again. Imagine standing in a cave filled with broken tools, charred hearths, and faint handprints. These are the lessons etched into the earth. Survival is precarious, adaptation is finite, influence endures, and extinction is a quiet, patient force. The vanished humans teach us to recognize the fragility of life and the importance of subtle persistence. You might assume that vanished humans, Neanderthals, Denisovans, Homo erectus, were little more than survival machines. Hunt, eat, sleep, repeat. Cute idea. The evidence suggests otherwise. They were thinking, imagining, creating. They left traces of consciousness, hints of creativity, and glimpses of symbolic thought that rivaled early Homo sapiens. Take ornaments, for instance. Shell beads, carved pendants, and painted stones hint at aesthetic sensibilities. These weren't merely functional, they were statements of identity, pride, or social signaling. Imagine a Denisovan carefully perforating a shell, threading it into a necklace and wearing it, or gifting it, to a companion. That small act is a conscious choice, a gesture of meaning, a whisper of individuality. Burial practices are even more revealing. Neanderthals often buried their dead, sometimes with tools, flowers, or ornaments. This isn't just ritual, it suggests reflection, memory, and perhaps even early spiritual thought. Someone considered the afterlife, or at least, cared about marking the end of life. It's a quiet, haunting testament to cognitive depth. Cave markings, though sparse, provide more evidence. Handprints, abstract patterns, and animal depictions hint at symbolic thinking. Not all caves were decorated for practical reasons. Some images may have been social, ceremonial, or simply artistic. Creativity wasn't a Homo sapiens monopoly, it was a shared trait, one that survived in fleeting moments long before the last Neanderthal vanished. Tools, too, show intelligence beyond survival. Specialized points, composite implements, and carefully prepared blades reflect planning, experimentation, and foresight. Fire management indicates control over natural forces and coordination within groups. These humans weren't reacting reflexively, they were anticipating, problem-solving, and innovating. Picture a Neanderthal artist, sitting near a fire, flint in hand, carving a pendant or painting a cave wall. Nearby, others tend to children, the hearth, or the hunt. It's a bustling, creative world that continues despite scarcity and harsh climate. They are human, profoundly so, in ways that we often overlook when we focus solely on survival. Music may have been part of their lives, too. Flutes made from bone suggest experimentation with sound, rhythm, and perhaps even shared performance. Singing, whistling, or rhythmic drumming could have provided cohesion, ritual, or entertainment. Creativity wasn't a luxury, it was woven into the fabric of existence, a mechanism for social bonding and cognitive expression. And let's not forget storytelling. While no written records survive, Symbolic artifacts and repeated patterns hint at shared narratives. Stories teach, preserve knowledge, and bind groups together. Imagine a young Denisovan listening to an elder recount hunts, weather patterns, or encounters with Homo sapiens. Knowledge passed through narrative is fragile, yet it is culture in action. The haunting truth is that these vanished humans were cognitively rich. They innovated, created, and reflected. Extinction does not erase this fact. Creativity, consciousness, and culture persisted until the very last generations. And traces of these behaviors influenced Homo sapiens, seeding ideas, practices, and innovations that survived long after the species themselves were gone. So pause and reflect. Their art, ornaments, burials, and tools are not just relics. They are evidence of minds that thought deeply, cared profoundly, and imagined boldly. They were human in ways we sometimes forget. And even as they vanish, their echoes remind us that intelligence and creativity are fragile, precious, and never guaranteed to endure. You might imagine that vanished humans disappeared purely because of competition or bad luck. The truth is more relentless. Climate shifts, unpredictable weather, and environmental instability played a decisive role. Neanderthals, Denisovans, and Homo erectus weren't just facing Homo sapiens. They were battling a planet that refused to stand still. Glaciers advanced and retreated unpredictably. Forests shifted. Rivers flooded or dried up. Food sources fluctuated wildly. Imagine trying to survive when your favorite hunting grounds are buried under ice one year, parched the next, and crowded by competitors in between. Every day is a gamble, every decision a survival test. The climate doesn't negotiate. It just changes, and you either adapt or you vanish. Migration became necessary, but it came with risks. Crossing mountains, rivers, or tundra exposed humans to predators, injury, and exposure. Isolated populations became genetically fragile. Small groups carried fewer individuals, fewer genes, fewer cultural resources. Every migration was a high-stakes gamble. Fail, and your species edges closer to extinction. Food scarcity was relentless. Mammoth herds dwindled. Plants failed to grow in frozen soil or drought-ridden plains. Hunter-gatherers were forced to expand territories, stretch resources, and compete more intensely. Malnutrition weakened populations, slowed reproduction, and made every individual more vulnerable to disease and environmental stress. Disease, climate, and isolation combined subtly but lethally. A single pathogen could sweep through a fragile band. Winters were long, summers brief, and resources unpredictable. Survival required not just skill, but luck, and sometimes luck ran out. Extinction isn't always dramatic, often, it's a quiet, cumulative erosion of life. Homo sapiens added pressure. Flexible, communicative, and increasingly numerous, they encroached on critical resources. Small skirmishes, competition for caves, and interbreeding changed population dynamics. Vanished humans adapted where possible, but the combined stress of climate, migration, and competition was almost irresistible. Yet they endured longer than most might expect. Tens of thousands of years of adaptation, resilience, and survival did not disappear overnight. Every migration, every fire tended, every tool sharpened, and every social bond maintained was a testament to persistence under pressure. Even in decline, they were masters of survival in extreme conditions, until the pressures finally exceeded their capacity. Pause and imagine it. A Neanderthal band trudges through a snow-choked valley. Children shiver beside fire, elders whisper advice, hunters move cautiously across frozen plains. Resources are scarce, the weather unpredictable, and every encounter, whether with animals, humans, or disease, carries lethal potential. Yet life continues, stubbornly, quietly, for just one more day. Environmental stress also shaped innovation. Fire management, tool refinement, and shelter construction became not just convenience, but necessity. Every improvement counted, every adaptation mattered, and yet the environment remained unforgiving. Even ingenuity has limits when the planet itself refuses to cooperate. The cruel irony, these vanished humans were resilient, intelligent, and adaptive, yet small, fragmented populations and environmental instability ensured that survival was temporary. Extinction is rarely a sudden event. It is patient, gradual, and unyielding, arriving not with fireworks but with the quiet erosion of opportunity. So pause again. Picture the frozen plains, the fragile caves, the isolated bands, and the relentless environmental challenges. The vanished humans survived remarkably long under impossible conditions, but even resilience has boundaries. Climate, migration, and scarcity slowly, invisibly, pushed them toward the final chapter. You might think that by the time a species is on the brink of extinction, creativity and ingenuity fade. The vanished humans, Neanderthals, Denisovans, and Homo erectus, kept inventing, adapting, and refining their tools and strategies until the very end. Survival demanded it. Necessity, as always, is the mother of innovation. Take toolmaking. Flint points were meticulously crafted, sometimes with multiple layers of preparation. Scrapers were shaped for efficiency, bone awls sharpened for sewing hides into protective clothing. Even in dwindling populations, broken tools were repaired, reused, or repurposed. The last generations weren't careless. They were economical, precise, and aware that every implement could mean life or death. Fire management persisted too. Hearths were carefully maintained. Charred remains show evidence of repeated use, suggesting control over fuel and warmth. Even in harsh, freezing conditions, they understood the value of a steady flame, for cooking, protection, and comfort. It was not leisure, it was survival. Yet, there is something human in the attention to detail, the care, the persistence. Ornamentation continued. Shell beads, carved pendants, and personal decorations indicate that even the final generations expressed identity and culture. Survival wasn't solely about meat and fire, it was also about signaling group cohesion, individuality, and perhaps even morale. You could say, why bother decorating when you might freeze tomorrow? But they did. Humanity persists even under pressure. Hunting strategies remained sophisticated. Ambushes, coordinated drives, and long-range techniques persisted in fragile populations. Evidence suggests occasional experimentation with new methods, perhaps in response to changing prey behavior or scarcity. Even at the edge of existence, they adapted. Brilliance does not vanish immediately, it lingers, flexes, and sometimes flickers in tiny sparks. Picture the scene. A Neanderthal sharpening a spear while the wind howls outside a cave, a Denisovan carving a pendant as firelight dances across the walls, children learning tracking skills while elders instruct quietly. Every action is purposeful. Every decision is life or death. And yet, there is culture, creativity, and reflection amidst scarcity and fear. Cave markings, though fading and sparse, suggest that symbolic expression persisted. Handprints, smudges, and simple abstract designs were still being made. They may have served ritual, social, or communicative purposes. Even as populations shrank, they left evidence that mind, creativity, and social connection endure to the last. And let's not forget small technological experiments. Composite tools, shafts and points bound with sinew or resin, indicate careful thought and planning. Clothing and shelter adjustments show adaptation to cold and fluctuating climates. They may not have been inventing the wheel, but they were constantly refining the tools, strategies, and behaviors necessary to survive in a shrinking, hostile world. The irony is darkly human. The closer they got to vanishing, the more each innovation mattered, yet the environment, isolation, and competition ensured that brilliance alone couldn't save them. Survival is never guaranteed. Even the smartest, most creative individuals cannot overcome relentless, cumulative pressures. So pause once more. Picture the last sparks of human ingenuity, repaired tools, carefully tended fires, symbolic gestures, adaptive strategies. They illuminate a species that refused to surrender entirely, even in the face of extinction. Brilliance lingers until the very end, but sometimes that is still not enough. You might imagine extinction as dramatic, a roaring cataclysm, a fiery finale, a world-ending spectacle. The reality is quieter, almost polite in its cruelty. Neanderthals, Denisovans, and Homo erectus didn't vanish in an instant. They faded. Slowly. Imperceptibly. Like a candle burning low, each flicker marking one more generation passing into silence. Imagine a small band huddled in a cave. Outside, wind shrieks through barren valleys. Snow drifts against the entrance. Firelight dances across worn tools and walls streaked with faint handprints. Children learn to track, elders whisper advice, hunters sharpen spears. Every day is a delicate negotiation with survival. Every step carries weight. And with every passing season, the numbers shrink. Food scarcity is relentless. Mammoth herds move unpredictably. Rivers freeze and dry, plants fail to bloom. Every meal is a gamble. Every hunt a calculated risk. Malnutrition, illness, injury, each threat compounds. The odds steadily tilt against life. Extinction creeps in like frost across a window pane. Slow, inevitable, silent. Disease adds an invisible pressure. Small, isolated bands cannot absorb even minor outbreaks. A single pathogen can decimate fragile populations. DNA evidence hints at interactions with Homo sapiens that may have introduced new illnesses. Survival is no longer about skill alone. Chance carries a disproportionate influence. Despite the pressures, ingenuity persists. Tools are repaired, fire is maintained, shelters adjusted. Ornaments and symbolic markings continue. Creativity, culture, and intelligence flicker until the very last generation. Humanity doesn't vanish quietly without leaving proof. Evidence of thought, care, and expression remains in the dirt, the stone, the charred remains. Picture the final moments. A child watching elders carve a pendant, a hunter listening for the faintest sound in frozen silence, the glow of a fire warming tired hands. Every gesture matters. Every action carries the weight of survival and legacy. And yet, even brilliance cannot overcome the slow grind of extinction. The archaeological record is fragmentary, incomplete, yet telling. Broken tools, scattered bones, faint cave markings, charred hearths, all whisper stories of a species persisting until the very end. No one survived to tell the story, yet, through these fragments, we reconstruct a life of resilience, creativity, and quiet suffering. And then, finally it ends. Perhaps a band perishes overnight in a storm. Perhaps a small group never reproduces, fading as elders pass. The last sparks of human ingenuity extinguish quietly, leaving behind traces in sediment, stone, and DNA. No fanfare. No witness. Just silence. The emotional resonance is profound. A species, brilliant and adaptive, shaping its environment, innovating, teaching, caring for one another, simply ceases to exist. Extinction is final, yet also invisible, leaving only whispers for those who study its traces millennia later. The quietness is haunting. The loss is absolute. And yet, influence persists. DNA, cultural echoes, and cognitive shadows continue in Homo sapiens. Tools, ornaments, rituals, and social behaviors passed through observation or imitation survive, leaving the living species subtly shaped by those who vanished. Extinction is never entirely complete. Legacy endures in unexpected ways. Pause one last time. Picture the empty caves, the silent valleys, the frost-covered plains. The vanished humans are gone, yet their whispers remain in biology, culture, and imagination. They endure in fragments, reminders of brilliance, resilience, and the fragile line between survival and oblivion. You might think that when a species vanishes, it disappears entirely. Cute but wrong. Neanderthals, Denisovans, and perhaps even Homo erectus left fingerprints that persist in modern humans. Subtle, silent, yet unmistakable. Their DNA, cultural traces, and innovations quietly shape the world we inhabit today. Start with genetics. If you're not of purely African descent, your genome likely contains 1 to 2% Neanderthal DNA. Denisovan genes are present in populations across Asia and Oceania. These fragments influence immunity, metabolism, skin tone, hair, and even susceptibility to certain diseases. Every sneeze, every immune response, every adaptation to cold or altitude may carry echoes of species that vanished tens of thousands of years ago. Extinction didn't erase them, it transformed them. Imagine it. A tiny Denisovan innovation for high-altitude survival persists in the lungs and blood of Tibetan populations today. Neanderthal genes tweak your immune system, shaping responses to pathogens. You might think you're entirely Homo sapiens, but in truth, you're a mosaic. The vanished humans persist silently within your very cells. Cultural echoes persist too. Tools, hunting strategies, and survival techniques developed by vanished humans informed early Homo sapiens practices. Spear points, flint knives, and coordinated hunting strategies were refined by Neanderthals and Denisovans long before Homo sapiens encountered them. Some methods were adopted, adapted, and improved. The survival of Homo sapiens owes subtle debts to vanished humans' ingenuity. Even symbolic behavior echoes. Early Homo sapiens may have observed burial rituals, ornamentation, and cave markings. These glimpses of culture likely shaped their emerging social structures, creative expression, and ritual behavior. Creativity and cognition are contagious in small ways. The vanished humans' aesthetic, practical, and social contributions ripple into modern human culture. Pause for a moment. Picture it. A modern human, walking through a museum, sees a carved Neanderthal pendant or a flint blade. Unknowingly, that object represents knowledge, innovation, and creativity passed across species and generations. It's a whisper from the past, a reminder that extinction is not absolute, and influence persists beyond survival. Behavioral influence may be subtler still. Social cooperation, empathy, and even cognitive tendencies could carry faint echoes of these vanished humans. Observing, imitating, or interacting with another species may have reinforced Homo sapiens' social skills, problem-solving, and adaptability. Traits we take for granted may have been shaped, in part, by the shadows of others who did not survive. And there's a haunting poetic twist. The species that vanished left the survivors stronger. Not in brute force, but in adaptation, knowledge, and subtle cultural inheritance. The endurance, ingenuity, and creativity of Homo sapiens were amplified by the legacies of those who could not persist. Extinction, in this sense, becomes a quiet form of mentorship. Even today, in DNA labs and archaeological digs, we see their fingerprints. Fragments of bone, ancient tools, and genetic sequences reveal lessons about resilience, adaptation, and innovation. Their story is not lost. It lives quietly, invisibly, within us. We are both heirs and witnesses. Pause again. Imagine your own body and mind. The genes that protect you, the instincts you follow, the creativity you express, partially shaped by humans who vanished long before Homo sapiens dominated the globe. Extinction is not a tidy ending. It is transformation, influence, and legacy, whispering through time, biology, and culture. You might assume extinction is someone else's problem, a distant, abstract event. The vanished humans, Neanderthals, Denisovans, Homo erectus, force us to confront mortality on a species level. They were brilliant, adaptive, and enduring. Yet they vanished. And this is the uncomfortable truth. Survival is never guaranteed, not for individuals, not for species. Consider the sheer scale. These humans thrived for tens or hundreds of thousands of years. They endured ice ages, famine, and relentless predators. They innovated, created, and cared for one another. And still, the slow pressures of environment, disease, and competition erased them. Extinction is not dramatic. It is patient, cumulative, and indiscriminate. Their disappearance invites reflection on fragility. Populations, no matter how clever or resourceful, are vulnerable. Isolation, dwindling numbers, and environmental instability create tipping points. Strength, intelligence, and creativity do not guarantee survival. Even brilliance is fragile when the world refuses to cooperate. There's also a lesson about legacy. Extinction is not total. Genetic fragments, cultural influence, and cognitive echoes persist in Homo sapiens. They shape our biology, social behavior, and even cognitive tendencies. Disappearance does not erase impact, it transforms it. The vanished humans whisper to us through DNA and artifacts, reminding us that influence can outlast physical presence. Pause again. Imagine standing in a cave, dust motes drifting through shafts of light. Broken tools, charred fires, faint handprints. The last generations left these traces. They tell a story of resilience, creativity, and quiet persistence. And yet, they also remind us of impermanence, of the inevitability that even the cleverest species may fade. Extinction also encourages humility. Homo sapiens survived, but only by a combination of skill, flexibility, and luck. The vanished humans were just as intelligent, just as adaptable, and yet their survival was insufficient. The line between life and oblivion is narrow, invisible, and often determined by forces beyond comprehension or control. There's a philosophical dimension too. What does it mean to exist when your species might vanish entirely? How does one measure the value of life, creativity, or culture when the world is indifferent? The vanished humans challenge our assumptions about permanence, success, and the meaning of endurance. They teach that survival is not entitlement. It is fragile, contingent, and often fleeting. And yet, there's a quiet hope. Their DNA, their innovations, their social behaviors persist subtly. They inform us, teach us, and influence us even in absence. Extinction is not the end of influence, it is a transformation. Life leaves traces, not always visible, but enduring in unexpected ways. Pause one last time. Consider your own species, your own life. How will it echo? What traces will persist? The vanished humans remind us that extinction is possible for any species, but impact can linger, quietly shaping the future. Brilliance, creativity, and resilience are powerful, but never invincible. The vanished humans, Neanderthals, Denisovans, Homo erectus, are gone. That fact is indisputable. But the story doesn't end there. Extinction is not silence. It is transformation. It is influence carried in fragments, whispers, and traces that persist long after life itself disappears. Their legacy is subtle, pervasive, and hauntingly human. Start with genetics. Every non-African human carries 1 to 2% Neanderthal DNA. Populations in Asia and Oceania carry Denisovan fragments. These genetic traces influence immunity, metabolism, altitude adaptation, and even cognitive tendencies. When you react to cold, fight off infection, or sense danger, part of that response may echo a species that disappeared tens of thousands of years ago. You are not just Homo sapiens. You are a mosaic. Culture, too, preserves their influence. Tools refined over millennia, hunting strategies, symbolic gestures, and social behaviors were observed, adopted, and adapted by Homo sapiens. Ornaments, cave art, and burial practices offer subtle lessons in identity, cooperation, and reflection. Every innovation, every ritual, every creative impulse contributed to shaping the species that survived. Extinction did not erase them. It folded their brilliance into ours. Pause for a moment. Imagine a Denisovan carefully crafting a pendant, a Neanderthal repairing a spear, a group tending fire and teaching children. Their hands, minds, and hearts influenced Homo sapiens in small but significant ways. They are gone, yet the imprint of their presence remains in your body, your culture, and your instincts. Even behavior carries echoes. Cooperation, empathy, foresight, and problem-solving were traits honed in vanished humans and observed, internalized, and sometimes replicated by Homo sapiens. The capacity for social cohesion, innovation, and resilience in our species owes debts to those who no longer walk the earth. Extinction, paradoxically, amplified influence. There is a haunting poetry to it. These humans survived ice ages, harsh climates, predators, and scarcity. They innovated, created, and persisted for tens of thousands of years. And yet, the slow convergence of pressures, environmental, biological, and competitive, finally claimed them. Their brilliance flickered out. But in that flicker, traces remained. DNA, culture, cognition, they endure, shaping life long after disappearance. And there is a philosophical lesson. Life is fragile. Survival is never guaranteed. Even the cleverest, most adaptive species may vanish. But influence is not bound by presence. Brilliance persists in unexpected ways, shaping successors, shaping ecosystems, shaping future generations. The vanished humans teach us that extinction is not total, that disappearance is often partial, and that legacy can outlast existence. So pause once more. Picture empty caves, frost-covered plains, broken tools, and faint handprints. Imagine the fires that flickered, the ornaments that were carved, the stories whispered in the wind. They are gone, yet present. Not in person, not in numbers, not in dominance, but in DNA, culture, thought, and the subtle architecture of survival. Their story is a reminder: resilience, creativity, and adaptation are precious, but fragile. Legacy persists, often invisibly. Influence is quiet, cumulative, and unexpected. The vanished humans vanish from sight, yet echo in us. Their lives, struggles, and brilliance remain, woven into the fabric of our species. So, as you reflect, remember this: extinction is patient, survival is fleeting, but impact endures. The humans who vanished millennia ago are gone, but they are still with us, quietly shaping who we are, how we survive, and the ways we carry forward the ingenuity, resilience, and creativity that life demands. And with that, the story of the vanished humans comes full circle, a tale of life, persistence, brilliance, quiet disappearance, and enduring echoes. They are gone, but never truly absent.